lectures that explore various aspects of his life, work, and ideology. Our esteemed speakers at ALS will delve into topics such as caste annihilation, constitutional rights, gender equality, education, economic justice, and the lit empowerment, shedding light on the relevance of Dr. Ambedkar's teachings in today's context. About Boston Study Group. Boston Study Group is a non-profit organization registered with IRS based in New England, USA. We are an Ambedkarite organization dedicated to creating a just and equitable society. We organize study groups, monthly meetings, lecture series, and other social activities in Boston area to support our mission. Our members include individuals, families, students, scholars, academics, and workers who share our vision of equality and upliftment. We focus on creating support structures and working with students from historically marginalized backgrounds. We are inspired by figures who have worked for human welfare, from Buddha and Sant Ravidas to Savitribai and Jyotirao Phule, Periyar, and Dr. Ambedkar. Today's speaker, Manju Edachira, is a cultural theorist and comparatist. She's a Madeleine Haas Russell postdoctoral fellow in critical caste studies and a lecturer in South Asian studies at Brandeis University, Massachusetts. Prior to this, she was a postdoctoral fellow at the International Center of Advanced Studies, New Delhi, from 2023 to 2024, and HSS IIT Delhi from 2021 to 23. She has a PhD in comparative literature from University of Hyderabad. She works in the areas of film and cultural studies, critical case studies, affect studies, South Asian popular cultural, and Kerala studies. Her topic today is Anti-caste Visualities and Emancipatory Film Practice, Ambedkar's Presence in Indian Cinema. And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Manju. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amrapali, for that introduction. And thanks a lot to BSG for giving me this opportunity to share my work. And I've been following the work of BSG, and it's an honor to be part of this Ambedkar lecture series. And yeah, I will just share my. Okay, I hope it is visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Thank you so much. So the topic is Anti-caste Visualities and Emancipatory Film Practice, Ambedkar's Presence in Indian Cinema. So it's something which everybody would, or people would always have something to talk about, or what is Ambedkar in Indian cinema. So I would, before going into his presence in Indian cinema, I just want to give a context of a little bit on my work on what a caste in cinema and also anti-caste visualities. So I'll just go to that part. So yeah, so first of all, there is the idea of Indian cinema, or what is Indian cinema. There is always this question of caste, or the narratives are always embedded in the question of caste. We see, I mean, it is part and parcel of cinema, and especially when it comes to the aesthetic aspects, how films have been working on with its narrative techniques, it's the presence of people who are working in the industry, and what is the culture of Indian cinema, or what is Indian cinema presence as its own culture. So one of the things which, when we look at it, there is always this normalization of caste aesthetics. It could be the setting, it could be the use of surnames, caste surnames, or it could be certain ways of showing or picturizing sometimes it could be consciously doing it, or sometimes it comes unconsciously. So there is always this projection or normalization of caste as culture, and where one would always see this the idea of also of there is this how culture also comes as part and parcel of only certain kind of a dominant caste culture, or a Brahminical culture, where we don't look at, or cinema kind of portrays in general this larger narrative of a very dominant culture. So there is this, and also caste works as a sensorial regime, because there is always untouchability or unseeability or unapproachability. So there is, caste always operates also at the level of our senses, in a sense that we should not, in a sense that one should not uh, touch, or one should not see, or one should not taste certain things, or one should not listen to certain like earlier times, like the Vedas, or so there is always this imposition of uh, uh, caste, like imposition of imposition on the sensorium of human beings. So there is this, it works in a sense, it is a it poses certain impositions on our senses. So it works in that sense as a sensorial regime. And cinema kind of follows that. So it shows, or like what we hear, or for instance, like what we hear as a morning sound would be a sound from the temple. So certain things which are so embedded in cinema, which also how it is connected with caste is the question. So and there is also certain kind of a gaze or a look which we develop over like looking at Indian cinema, which is largely about uh, so certain kind of gaze where you will have where you have a certain kind of power working with how caste operates in cinema. So which would place like the people who are from the oppressed caste, especially when it comes to Dalits, in the marginal locations, or as somebody like, or there is a question of invisibility, like they would be in invisible characters, or there is a complete erasure of people from the oppressed caste when it comes to picturizing their presence, and there is a complete absence. And even if there is a presence which would be always stereotyped, it would be docile, it would be weak, or it is always in opposition to the other, which is largely the dominant caste groups, or the Brahminical figure. So there is this question of how cinema treats, or how Indian cinema uh, works with the question of oppressed caste presence on screen. And it's not just on screen, it is also the question of what's happening outside. Because I mean, if we look at Indian cinema, we cannot say that it is there is this there are studies which tell that like Dalits have only entered now in the industry, but we never know, or Dalits have been always part and parcel of the industry, perhaps in many other fields, perhaps as junior artists, or perhaps as light boys, or perhaps as people who work or who provide labor at various levels. Only thing is, yeah, there is when we look at the representation question, it is perhaps like only now we see a more of an anti-caste resistance, whereas there were people who were always part and parcel of the industry, and how they how they worked with the system. So that is something which we need to also look at. So when Dalit subjectivities came to the screen, it is always done through the discourse of progress and patronizing, so not necessarily as treating the people as people. So that is something which was missing. And also the question of like, and also caste is shown as just violence, like in certain parts, or the violence of caste, which is like only when it comes to the oppressed communities, it is only the violence which we see, or the humiliation which we see, or the rejection which we see. So we don't go, or cinema does not show us the normal regularized life which the people of the oppressed communities live. So that's something which kind of, this was the background within which like we look at Indian cinema. But then there is a shift which happened quite some time back, especially when it comes to the presence of anti-caste filmmakers in Indian cinema. Yeah. So so there is a kind of transformative aesthetics which the anti-caste filmmakers brought in to the picture of Indian cinema, especially when it comes to music and technology, and they always work with certain political, and I mean the idea of bringing these anti-caste visualities on screen, which always comes with certain kind of a political and poetic together. And it's not where you see it's not just a documentation, or it's not just a making of or the largely the idea of making documentaries, which is just documenting the lives of the people, which is also important, which is an excellent medium, or which is important to have documentaries. But when it comes to the popular cinema, you have to have certain different kind of aesthetics. That's where the music and technology becomes important. And also there is an aesthetics of color, metaphors, and community, which all come together when they make films, like film directors like Ranjit or Mari Selvaraj in Tamil, or Nagraj Manjule in Marathi. And there are many others who are making films these days, and there is a way they change the gaze of Indian cinema, or something that they kind of, their work is against the Brahminical caste aesthetics, which is largely the mode within which Indian cinema worked. And if you look at any industry, take it Hindi or Malayalam or Tamil or Marathi, everywhere you would see how there is a shift which kind of happened. Yeah, of course, it is more prominent when it comes to Tamil and maybe like a little bit of Marathi, but other industries are also following uh, certain what do you call, the narrative techniques, or certain change in the visuality, or certain change in the sensorial practice of cinema. So that's something which is different, because the change which is, or the transformation which is brought by the anti-caste filmmakers has a change, or has an impact on the way how films have been taken, or how films have been, like how the films are in these days, how it is being taken, and how there is a change, or how there is an influence on other cinemas. So what they do is they bring a certain kind of an emancipatory aesthetics, and which is so much about interbeing, not about closing off, not about shutting others off, not about talking about in isolation, but about being with the other. Or there is always the idea of resistance, but also there is an invitation for the other to be part of the community, or to be there is this question of interbeing, which is also taken from largely in Ranjit's cases, also brings a lot of Buddhist principles. So there is this idea of emancipatory aesthetics, which changes the earlier, or which is against the Brahminical caste aesthetics, which is happening recently in some of the industries. And they work not only with the visuality, because it was earlier the visuality which was something which we would have certain ways of doing that. There is this idea of caste visualities, but what happens with the later part, or what happens with these directors, they not only work with the visuality, they of course they change, they bring in emancipatory images, but also with multisensorial effect and expression. So you would have certain ways, like you will listen to different kinds of or you, the listening, like the music might be different. Or for instance, take take for Manjule's film, the Marathi way in that which we hear is different from the usual Marathi cinema. So, or else like look for Ranjit's film in Tamil, you would see how music plays a major role in bringing different kinds of sensorial experience, or brings certain expression and affect, and that effect which the film creates also is inviting to the other to be part of that film, that process. And it's not a film which is made only to be watched by people from the oppressed caste communities, or in this case, like not just for Dalits. He's making film for, it is a product to be watched by, it's a commercial cinema which is to be watched by others. And some of them are also reaching out, or many of them are commercial success, and there's a way to invite the spectator to be with or to engage with what he is offering. So it is in this context that I am bringing to look at how Baba Sahib Ambedkar is being placed in this whole anti-caste aesthetics or anti-caste filmmaking, and how his presence is looked at differently, or we will look at how this has changed over a period of time, and how we'll look at the changes, and how his image and how his presence in especially not just image, but how his presence is there in Indian cinema. So yeah, so there are many works, very interesting works done by many scholars on Ambedkar's presence, or Ambedkar in Indian cinema, and his absence in Indian cinema, and how the recent emergence, which is especially through the anti-caste filmmakers, and also like how his presence comes in many industries. Taking from, for instance, Harish Wankade's work, or there are many other also works where how we trace the presence of Ambedkar in cinema, which is quite interesting, because the works on Ambedkar, especially the academic works on Ambedkar, is also a lot, like these days there is a lot of interest in Ambedkar studies, and how this is also connected with his presence in cinema. So there is this, like, before going into how his presence in cinema is looked at, how Ambedkar views cinema is something which is again is of a recent interest, because there is this a particular interview which came out in Film India in 1942, which Baba Sahib had given that time, and how that particular interview is of importance at present. And so there are studies which look at how he viewed cinema. So one of the things you can see in the PPT here, he just looks at cinema uh, as a pedagogical tool to reach out to people, and to teach the audience, or teach the people that it is how to teach them to enjoy, or how to teach them uh, to to uh, to enjoy life or laugh. All these things are, for him, it's important, which is something where which could be this cinema could be seen as a cinema of reconstitution, or something. There is a possibility of looking at cinema as a also a tool for as an anti-caste space, or something where you can bring in the anti-caste ethos to. So there is this. So when we look at it retrospectively, how Ambedkar viewed cinema is very important, because this was a new medium at that point of time. So cinema was introduced in India only in 1913, but then it was largely silent films. and we are also aware that there were a lot of mythologicals, which was Hindu mythologicals, and it was films on. I mean, first Indian like documented film is Raja Harishchandra, which is again based on Hindu mythology, and there are so many other films on various gods and godly figures. And this is where Ambedkar had a disagreement with cinema, because he thought cinema as a medium had a lot of potential than just to deify or than just to idealize figures in the medium. Like, for instance, he wants to see how these idols have been shattered through the pictures, not necessarily just this mythological, which were just deification of these figures. So he was looking at the unlimited democratic potential of potential of cinema, and how that is important, or how that is a pedagogical tool to reach out to the people, to engage with the people, and to look at, or to take it as a medium where one can actually open up various possibilities. So, for instance, uh, uh, he talks about a particular film which is called The Birth of a Baby, which was made in US at that point of time, which was in 1938. And the film was, he saw it as an educational tool, where one can see how the process of giving birth to a baby, or like how this as an uh, educational video, this could be actually shown. Or he did not see it as a medium where there is, like, for instance, like, where in opposition to somebody like Gandhi, who saw it as a sinful technology, or something where immorality is something where you encourage immorality, and or in a sense, it's just a money making a medium, but not necessarily. He did not see it as a potential pedagogical tool, whereas Ambedkar saw it as a pedagogical tool where one can engage with the people. And he was also concerned about, in this particular interview, he talks about how it is important for the public to be like to behave well inside the theaters, not spit, or not make the place bad. So in a sense, it is important that people learn how to behave in public. So he takes it up to look at different aspects, one to go beyond this deification or mythologicals, or to give more knowledge about how to behave, or a kind of a self criticism, and to go against, or to take it up, and to go against the usual practice of just mythologicals, but to bring in educational materials and reach out to people, where people should be taught how to live a life, like how people should be taught how to enjoy or to laugh, because a lot of people, like, include, he gives an example that how people actually thought that having fun, or having to laugh, or to enjoy a joke is was not people saw it as not as important, but as something which is bad. So for him, that has to change. So he saw the entertainment possibility of cinema, but at the same time viewed it as an educational tool. So that's how Ambedkar saw cinema, which is again different from Gandhi, because Gandhi has refused to watch films. The only film, apparently, like, from the studies he watched, is called Ram Rajya, which was in 1944. And then he was also invited to watch another film which is like on Moscow. I am not getting the name. I'm not recollecting the name now, but yeah, so it's not necessarily that, like, he did not want to watch a film, but the film which we watched, like, only to do with which was not necessarily to do with education, but again, it is a mythological. So in a sense, there is a clear-cut difference which Ambedkar had when it comes to the his engagement with cinema. So then to moving on to talk about how do we visualize Ambedkar in art practice, like in different kinds of art. So to just to go back to a little earlier, like there were cartoons on Ambedkar, and there is a particular work called No Laughing Matter, the Ambedkar cartoons from 1932 to 1956 by Unamati Shamsundar, which where you can see there is a reduction of mind and body. You can say that because it's also like there is the way people see cartoons as a mode of caricature. So there is a way one can actually read into it and tell that that's just because of the medium, but there is a way within which Ambedkar's mind and body is being reduced through these images, and there is a vilification of his images, and it also had a casteist and communal tones, and how he was like represented as a stunted figure in many of these cartoons. And so one of the things, very interesting things, if we look at these cartoons, even while picturizing him as a stunted figure or as like through various stereotypes, you can see the unavoidability of the image of a book. So what he has written, or his engagement with books, or his like he has written many books, and he was very important in bringing certain ideas. So the idea of book, and it could be also to connected to the idea of like, yeah, he was the chairperson of Constitution drafting committee, so that could be also that. But there is this Ambedkar and the idea image of book, which comes in many of these cartoons as well. And in a sense, if we can look at it, we can actually see how his own words precede his images in many of these cartoons or these illustrations, which so there is a change which happens in the recent time. There are so many contemporary illustrations, especially by anti-caste artists, and there is a change which happens when Baba Sahib Ambedkar becomes a subject of art. And that is the change which is happening from the earlier time, where Ambedkar as just a politician, or Ambedkar as just a leader of the oppressed, or Ambedkar as just there were ways within which Ambedkar was or as law minister, or Ambedkar was categorized like into all these cartoons. But there is a change which happens in the contemporary illustrations, where when he becomes a subject of art, a lot of uh, images or the pictures, if you look at, so there are certain things which are very important in these contemporary illustrations, which are like, there you can see education becomes very important in these illustrations, and book as an image comes a lot in these images. There is this idea of celebration, there is the idea of community, there's this idea of nature and tree. So all these things are there in many of these anti-caste illustrations, which I will just go in a bit. And so that there is this clear-cut difference which happens when it comes to the picturization or visualization of Ambedkar in these art forms. For instance, I have two pictures. So this is a cartoon which came out in 1948, where you can see it came out during the Hindu Code Bill, where you can see Ambedkar sitting on a tree, where he has a book in his hand, while a lot of women are coming and threatening their husbands that they will divorce them. So it is just to show like how the image of book is very important in Ambedkar's cartoons as well. So going to the recent works, recent illustrations, you can see here I have two pictures. The right side one is by Malvika Raj, which is she has used Madhubani art to paint this, and then the other one is left side one is an illustration by Nitin Donald, and it's a book called B.R. Ambedkar: A Life in Books by Yogesh Maitreya and Nitin Donald. So you can see how books are there in these both works, and in the other one it is about the image of a tree or and Ambedkar's ideas. So how there is a change in imagining Ambedkar in this recent illustration. So to change the visuality question and to go back, so then what happens when Ambedkar comes to cinema? So there is this Ambedkar as an image. That's what we saw first. I mean, it could be some courtroom or it could be some police station. So first it was only through the state or to mark somebody's identity as somebody from Dalit community, or you will have a picture of Ambedkar in the house. So there is a way within which Ambedkar's image was portrayed, or Ambedkar was an image in many of these, how in these films. So first, it is largely about an image, but then we can see a lot of, not lot, but there are major, like 2, 3 biopics of Ambedkar. So the one which we are mostly familiar with would be the Jabbar Patel version of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, which came in 1999, 2000. So which was in English. So which is where you can see the poster here where Mammootty played the role of Ambedkar. So that was largely about how Ambedkar's life was being portrayed. So that the question of presence, which is slightly different here because it is largely about his life and his the film is a biopic, and there are also there are biopics which came out in Marathi and also in Canada. Like one was in 1989 and one was in 2005. So there are films where you can see how there is this the genre of biopics played in portraying Ambedkar and his engagement. Certain instances from his life is being taken up by these films. So yeah, perhaps this 2000 film, like Jabbar Patel film, would be the most known or widely known, which had major instances from his life. And so then there is a so that's when we are actually familiar, or we are actually looking at the image, or to see how he's been represented, not just as an image but as the whole film is about his life and certain important aspects of his life. And so there is this from an image, there's this shift which happens when it comes to the recent anti-caste films. What does Ambedkar's presence means in Indian cinema now, especially from an anti-caste perspective? So there are so many works on representation where there is this idea of representing the certain identities, especially in when it comes to how Dalits have been represented in Indian cinema, and the questions on that. But what I am also looking at, there is this idea of critical presence, which is not just about being represented. Critical presence is also about certain kind of consciousness, certain kind of an awareness with which you make film, or you are aware of what is happening, or there is a way the engagement is different when there is the idea of critical presence comes, which is different from just the representation, like because we have a lot of representing certain identities or certain figures or certain events, and it's just a representation of that. But critical presence does something different when it comes to the when it comes to cinema, especially. So and here what happens is that Ambedkar's presence is not just an image in these films, especially the anti-caste films done by directors. I'm taking Paranjit here, uh, which is in Tamil. So just a second. Amrapali, how much time do I have?
We have until 11:30.
Okay, no, I can take like 10 more minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
go for
thank
it.
you.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, so there is this change which is happening with the image of Ambedkar, which was just like you would see in certain scenes or to mark certain instances. So you would see the representation, or there is this image which comes and goes. So that is something which is a major difference when it comes to films, especially by Ranjit. There is this idea, like there's Ambedkar's image kind of exceeds the image, or it is not just a documentation of Ambedkar being there or as an image, but you can see the way these films have been imagined is more largely inspired by his ideas and thoughts, and in a sense that how Ambedkar appears on these films, and which is different because you would see even from the first film onwards, for instance, Ranjit's, and to the recent film, there is the way like within which you imagine certain anti-caste ideas and certain resistance and also certain invitation to be part of being with the others. So that there is a way through which Ambedkar appears on all these films. So first thing to look at is like how it is not just an image. Like you, of course, there are images which would come. Even in this particular picture, you can see the image of Buddha, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar in the background. This is a shot from the film Kala. So similarly, there are, and these images would recur in many of his films, and it is not just an image where one it comes and goes, or it just comes to mark somebody's identity, but it is through these images. So Ambedkar's presence here is important because it's not just representing Ambedkar as a figure in these films, but how his ideas and thoughts are important here, and how it is at once making a lot of at once resisting a lot of other oppressive categories here, like for instance how it is against caste, how it is against capitalism, because cinema is it is like we have to tell that it is like made to make money, it is capitalist, but how it has figured that the Ambedkar was written against these questions on class oppression, caste oppression, and how this particular ideas of taking or his presence is at once is against all these dominant structures like patriarchal structures or the caste practices. So there is a way the presence is disturbing the caste aesthetics of Indian cinema. So it is not just him as an image, like to come and go to for certain just be there in certain moments, but as a presence which disturbs the caste imaginations or the capitalist imaginations or the patriarchal imaginations. So there is this change which is happening when it comes to especially like for instance Ranjit's films, and it also brings in certain difference, which is like earlier it was just to mark like, so Ambedkar would kind of the presence of Ambedkar would mark somebody as just somebody as Dalit, but not anything other than that, or certain sometimes it could be resistance, but it becomes a closed category in many of the picturizations. But what happens with Ranjit opens up the question of like not just the oppressed self, but as the idea of Ambedkarite. What is to be an Ambedkarite in Ranjit's film? So, for instance, the film called Natchathiram Nagargirathu, which can be roughly translated as a star shoots across. so which came in 2022, which that film had the protagonist is a female. She is she comes from an oppressed background, like from a Dalit background. She when she's asked whether she's a Marxist, the way she responds is that I'm an Ambedkarite, and it kind of opens up. It's not a caste category here. It is an invitation to be part of the thoughts of Ambedkar, the positions Ambedkar have taken against many of the oppressive systems. So it opens up this, and it is a woman who is telling here, and a Dalit woman who is telling this. So that is very important when it comes to Indian cinema, which has not seen these kind of a protagonists who are there, who kind of are against all the uh, who are against the oppressive systems. And so, what is to be an Ambedkarite is something which Ranjit is also works with through that particular film, and he's also bringing a community. Or these filmmakers bring a community through Ambedkar or through Ambedkar's words and visuals and acts and associations. So there is an action which is asked from the community, or there is a community in action, which is what Janjit wants to show, or many of these anti-caste artists want to show. And this is both through words and visuals, not just as an image, but the presence is through his words and visuals and acts and associations. And this is an emancipatory presence beyond all the immediate reductions, like just calling him as a Dalit leader, or just calling him as somebody who just only worked for oppressed caste. So it's not that. It is about opening up the possibility of an emancipatory presence beyond all the immediate reductions. So what is this presence here? It is the presence is not just something which can be reduced to just an image or reduced to just a representation alone, but as an emancipatory presence, as a possibility, as a also a presence of a community, and like imagining an Ambedkarite community. So that's something which these filmmakers, especially here Ranjit, who works in this context, he comes as a transformatory force, or he brings the image of Baba Sahib as a transformatory force, or his presence as something to change the already the oppressive systems, especially in this case caste. So the presence here becomes, it's important beyond all the immediate reductions. So yeah, this is where I would like to place the presence of Ambedkar, especially in the anti-caste visualities of Indian cinema, and how it is not just like just showing his just image, but how his thoughts have been influence the way we see films, or how we imagine films. So that's something which is very important, and which is very much connected to how Ambedkar views cinema, not just as deification, but as something which we can have more critical engagement with what is happening around, and as a pedagogical tool, and at the same time a medium of entertainment. So yeah, I think I'll stop with this. I can take questions if there are anything later. Um, just a second, I just want to also show a little one image from Ranjit's film called Nachitharam Nagargirathu. Here, this is the protagonist who is holding a book called The Buddha and His Dhamma, which is Ambedkar's kind of like towards the end of his life, he has written this particular text, and which is quite important because you don't, I mean, conversation is going on, but how book becomes an important part of his films, and it is in many other films as well. Uh, and they are reading and they are engaging with these ideas, and here it is more important because this is a woman who is reading, a Dalit woman who is reading it, and how she's like ready to uh, move forward, and not just not just to reduce her, like, or the other person's immediate actions, but to be open and she's ready for more engagement. So this is something which I just wanted to show. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Manju. That was awesome. Of all the directions that the films are moving in, this is probably the best that we want films and cinema to move in. And thank you for bringing your insight into it. We can now open for questions. We have until 11:30, and we can start a discussion. If anybody has questions, please feel free to
Yeah. Can
go ahead.
I ask?
Sure.
Yeah, Manju, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I'm so happy to listen to you, and even in Telugu films also, like Tamil films and other films of India. Recently the visibility of Ambedkar through not only through the narrative but also his portraits are very much visible, particularly in the courtrooms, police stations, and other government institutions. They do show uh, an image, portrait of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, which is largely absent in 90s movies, and till 2000, early 2000, it is not visible. I don't remember that I saw Ambedkar's portrait in movies till 2000, 2005. I hardly remember. So my question is like, I think it is similar even in other parts of India also, in other film industries, films. Do you observe a trajectory in this representation of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the films, particularly through these portraits? When did it begin approximately across India? Am I clear? Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Chandu. Yeah. So thanks a lot for the question, Chandu, and it is an important question, which is about how there is a change in picturizing Ambedkar in cinema. One of the things which which I noticed is that, so how when it exactly started is something which it's difficult to pinpoint, because there are certain films. So for instance, this Marathi film of 1989 is his biopic, and but when it comes to other industries, it is largely, yeah, you can see this change, which is largely like perhaps the post 90s, and if we can look at it, as yeah, even in Tamil, it is a later change which happens, and it starts off with this image of Ambedkar in the state locations, like in the like for instance courtroom or police station or governmental offices. But it was not there in the beginning, because we are so used to seeing Gandhi or Nehru or Indira Gandhi or different figures in these kind of places, like spaces. But yeah, it changes in a gradual manner. It's only in the recent or a kind of post the con like when Ambedkar's the idea or the discourse on Ambedkar became kind of more prominent in the public sphere. It is only that time, or I'm not sure whether we have been noticed it enough to see like whether there were at moments pictures of Ambedkar coming and going. But this is a change which does not just mark somebody as something or something as identity, but there is the change which I am trying to track is like how this image and the characters or the narrative, which is quite different. I was largely looking at, when I was talking about this, to look at how the images have changed or how the presence of Ambedkar have been changed. It is, I was looking at Ranjit's films, also some of the other films. For instance, like I was just like I saw this Lapata ladies, and the character called Manju Mai, how she talks and sits in a like very confident position, and like Baba Sahib picture is there behind, and then she talks about and that particular character is very important, and the presence of Baba Sahib there is not just to mark her who she is, but it's to just show the way how his teachings or how his thoughts have change, like have impact on those that particular character, or there's a way, there is a the change. And I'm telling, like, one of the things is it's because of the way the public discourse have been changed. These images are also coming, and these images are not just images, but something which is in something which is doing a major difference in the way we think of particular present. So in a sense, yeah, like the changes must have started from the 1990s to 2000. But yeah, I mean, I cannot be like 100% sure that there were no images at all, or it might have like we did not see, or it's not. Yeah, it's largely about, if we look at, it's largely about the question of absence. But even when it comes in the beginning, it was not necessarily as a strong presence, but it was just in certain spaces to mark the place in terms of state or in terms of someone's identity. But the shift which is happening is now it's more about his presence, and that presence is so much influenced by the ideas. Because there is also another thing which I wanted to add. There is this commercialization of, like, using Ambedkar, like just having just Ambedkar's picture, or having just certain uh, what do you call, like certain ideas, like just bring in certain names or certain political slogan into this and into films. But then that film might not be doing many changes structurally or in general. But there is that aspect as well. So if we look at, there are two things. So I was also reminded of a particular paper in EPW on like how people who are working on Ambedkar is looking at, there is the ideas through fashion and fascination. While fashion is largely about, like, everybody is working on Ambedkar, and then you have to work on Ambedkar. But how like fascination is about, you're fascinated by his work, and then by the ideas which he proposed, and how you are working on that. So there is this two ways through which, also this is not about cinema, but about the recent academic works and also the books. But so in the same way, you can also see in cinema, like one side there is a fashionable showing of just like for the commercial purpose, because there are a group of people who would watch that, but it's not changing or challenging the dominant ideologies. But the other side, it is important to do that as well. So there are two ways. So there are films which would just show it for the sake of it, and also the films which will engage it and question certain things which Ambedkar stood for. So yeah, so in that sense, it is if we look at it, it is two ways of looking at the presence of Ambedkar in Indian cinema. So yeah, and thank you so much for bringing the Telugu uh, the how it is worked in Telugu as well, which I haven't looked at much. But yeah, and thank you so much, Andu.
Thank you, Manju. Just adding to that, I mean, it's even though for commercial purpose, but it's welcoming change, at least for me, locating Telugu film industry, where in 90s, you might know this Vishwanath films of Swayam Krushi, and even in 2000 film, this Jayam Manedara, these movies, some of these movies are entirely about Dalits, on Dalits, but we don't see even, the image of Ambedkar. But now to see Ambedkar's portrait, very large portraits in court halls where when victims, stand and behind them showing the Ambedkar. There is a positive representation bringing that image, as well as there is a negative thing also. Like in some movies, recent movies, they do show, keep the portrait of Ambedkar backside of the villains. Opposite to Gandhi, even this politics of portraits of Gandhi and Ambedkar, it still continues in Telugu film industry, where hero, backside of hero, they keep Gandhi's portrait, whereas for villains they keep Ambedkar's portrait. In some movies, like somebody's like Koratala Shiva, I heard he is a kind of fellow who has progressive thoughts. So he brings Ambedkar portraits, presents him backside of heroes and backside of people who suffer, and also he brings the quotations from his life. So some of these are really welcoming, because I'm a film goer, film lover. I watched a lot of movies from my childhood, but I never seen Ambedkar. I mean, I was not introduced to Ambedkar even through the films, unless I came to university. But now the things, I mean, phenomenon has changed in television industry. I think it's largely. I mean, what I was asking was there any connection with any particular social movements? It's not easy to see in a film industry like Telugu, which is occupied and dominated by this dominant caste people. Bringing Ambedkar portrait itself is the greatest thing for me. I mean, I look at that this way. Yeah, that's all. No need to answer this, but I just thought to add it. Thank you so much, Manju.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? Feel free to raise your hands, so and then we can take up questions, or go ahead and unmute.
Amrapali, there are questions in chat box.
All right. I cannot see
Okay.
the.
Yeah, so there is one from Sagar K. How do you see non-Dalit actors playing roles of Dalit characters like Made in Heaven web series?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the question, which is cinema, like to talk about cinema, it is a place of possibilities where one should actually look for uh, uh like look for like something which is beyond the immediate identities. So which is in that sense like non-Dalit actors playing Dalit roles and Dalit actors playing non-Dalit role, it should all be welcomed. And it is in a sense where one is also working with it's not about who it's just not about what you are playing, which is about, again, it comes to the question of representation, like you will be represented as something. But it's largely about I mean, as far as I think, it's largely about the certain kind of a critical presence, certain kind of a consciousness which you bring to the industry and bring into the question of filmmaking. And also you as an artist, and what are you doing, and how are you engaging with the question, so which is where it makes a difference. So in that sense, yeah, I think it is a medium where you have like the possibilities of something which is beyond one's immediate identities, and to talk more about or to show or to represent or to look at the various possibilities cinema offers. So yeah, I think thank you for that.
Priya raised the hand.
Yeah. So Dickens raised it before, so let's give it to Dickens and then Priya. Dickens, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot to Boston Study Group and to Manju for this fantastic exposition on cinema. As scholars of cinema, I think most of the debates that come is looks at this present change in Indian cinema in the with respect to anti-caste cinema, but also question of Ambedkarite aesthetics. It's an ongoing debate, right? So it's an ongoing debate, and Manju has fantastically captured, I think, some of these very important moves that's happening in the film industry, film studies, connecting it to the movement. And I thank Boston Study Group for opening this. I have a couple of from the questions that came in, and I thought I'll just put it before Manju and ask her to reflect on this. One side is this important question of image, Ambedkar's image, whether Dalits have a presence in cinema, whether people who are discriminated by caste, right, or marginalized by caste have any narrative presence in major popular cinema, right? That one debate is, and is going to be a long debate. It's going to be a debate. It's not going to change. The narrative presence is going to be which is an unanswered thing. I mean, a representational thing that's going to be there, right? And one can always critique, like, whether women are represented properly, whether tribes are represented properly, or whether Dalits are represented properly, whether blacks are represented properly. This is a never ending long. Cinema should change, right? That's something. The other important thing that you raised is what is, I think, very pertinent is what is the role of Ambedkarite dimension, an anti-caste dimension to the use of cinema. I think the way you showed is how did Ambedkar view cinema, right, as a pedagogical tool, not as something only as a capitalist industry. So I want you to think of this, Manju, and then reflect on if cinema is going to be a tool, a vehicle, a media practice, right? There is a pedagogical political role, like people write novels, like people narrate stories, like people create poetry or people create paintings. It's a media tool, right? So to have, therefore some of these questions, lose out its edge. Whether if a representation is there, that's as you told, people can be used as a commodity. An image can be used as a commodity. Instead, if there's an Ambedkarite force of using cinema, right? And that's what I think your talk was pushing towards. Now the issue is this cinema is largely regional, right? Largely regional. That's from your own reflection. Would you want to say what are the contexts, what are the conditions we can make to make it as a global kind of a phenomenon, right? Like somebody told, in Telugu we have, in Marathi we have, in Tamil we have, somebody in Hindi we don't have. Like instead of that, can there be a larger wave of practice which you can think about, where it's not about language, not region, it's about a way in which you approach cinema. You use cinema in certain purpose, right? Which is very different from documentaries. Would you have some reflections on it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lenny, for that. I think, yeah, I'll just start from what is there as this to distinguish. Yeah, you spoke about the question of Ambedkar as image and narrative, like whether the Dalits have any narrative presence. But the second part, which is what I'm also interested in, which is about an Ambedkarite dimension or Ambedkarite aesthetics, which is challenging the caste aesthetics or the dominant aesthetics which we are or the Indian cinema is largely working with. So yeah, it is. I take the idea of this cinema as a pedagogical tool or a pedagogical political tool, which is something like somebody like Bell Hooks was also talking about like a little earlier about, especially when it comes to African American films or how African Americans engaged with cinema in the US, and how there is this black presence in or how they challenged the white like the white supremacist industry. So that is something which somebody like Hook spoke about, the pedagogical political, like cinema as a pedagogical political tool, and to go to what is whether to have a global change or a larger way of film practice. It is something which is an ongoing process, I would say, because the figure of Ambedkar now becomes, it's not just as somebody who is just like somebody like whom we only locate within India, but becomes as an emancipatory figure, where perhaps this like we are, I mean, I'm sitting and talking in Boston in an Ambedkarite like a study circle, like in an association where people are largely thinking about how to change or how to emancipate the how to go beyond the caste reductions, or so there is that itself is a way of looking at Ambedkar's presence as a pedagogue or as a figure, as an emancipatory figure who kind of brings certain kind of solidarity amongst different kinds of oppressed groups in the world. So in that sense, so there is a change, which is, of course, it is, you know, what I was talking largely about Tamil cinema or Marathi, which is, yeah, I mean, which is these are Indian films. But there is a change which also is opening up, like for instance, film like Origin, where you can see how there is the which is made in the US. So there is this figure of Ambedkar coming, or there are people who are invested in researching on or working on or bringing changes, especially when it comes to I mean, in this case, when it comes to the cinematic or the film the cinematic or the aesthetics. So that is an ongoing process where one should not just reduce cinema to the level of representation, whether it's a film is a story of or whether we have just a picture of Ambedkar, or whether we have certain like small minute changes in the way the images have been seen or perceived, that changes only at the level of representation. Of course it is important, but we should not reduce to that, but to look at the larger possibilities of bringing a certain kind of an anti-caste consciousness to making cinema, which is at once against capitalism, which is at once against patriarchy. So there is the possibility of taking Ambedkar's ideas or Ambedkarite aesthetics and bring into the narrative, like to even to make films, like how that has been how that influences our imagination of making a film or imagining a film. So that's something, an ongoing process, and I think we have to also move or we have to equally, like while looking at representation question, like we should not just contain ourselves to just that, but to look at also the possibilities offered by cinema as a medium, as a pedagogical tool. But I am also against just taking it as a just as something which is something like a documentary, which is largely used as a pedagogical tool, but it is also made as an entertainment industry. Like it is also for entertainment, but how do we mix these two together is something which we can all think about together. And yeah, that would be something to ponder about, like how do we bring in both together and make films which are conscious, or which are conscious of an anti-caste presence. So yeah, I think that's something which we can think of. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Priya has raised her hand. Priya, do you want to go ahead? Priya, you there?
I think there is a question in the chat before Priya.
I cannot see the chat.
Okay, it's a question from Anna George. The presence of Ambedkar and Ambedkarite ideals in movies of directors like Paranjit and Nagaraj Manju is indeed inspiring. However, many immature representations, often backed by huge budgets, misrepresent and appropriate Dalit leaders. RRR is an example. How can this appropriation be countered in academia?
Thank you, Anna, for that question. Yeah, so this is something which also I was talking about. There are there are different ways of looking at, like there is this commercial representation or commercialization of or appropriation of Dalit figures or anti-caste figures. And also at the same time, there are people who are, that's where I was like largely looking at what is critical presence and how that is changing the way how people, like how different directors have looked at figures like Ambedkar or many other leaders. So how do we counter these kind of misrepresentations? More than looking at how do we counter these kind of misrepresentation, one of the things, always distinguish between or like the way we look at, there are certain, I mean, again, like when we come to the question of representation, which is largely, I mean, I think it is certain way limiting when we think of just to look at representations, which is in a sense we cannot like go beyond or look at, or what does it offer. So in that sense, so there is a problem with the question of like, yeah, it could be limiting, but there are ways of looking at, okay, what is this again to look at, as I was taking that there is a fashionable way of portraying these leaders or these figures, and there is also another a more conscious way of portraying them. So, and how do we tackle them is something, yeah, it is something which cinema as a medium has to do, or what one way of doing this is to look at like films like Ranjit, who had done a lot of criticism on the industry through cinematic narratives, like through cinematic devices, which like earlier only reviewers used to do. I mean, sit and write. But there is a change which these filmmakers brought in. Were they answered, or were they challenged, critiqued the present or the caste aesthetics of cinema through their movies? So then in a sense there is a counter representation, or there is a counter film practice like done by filmmakers like Ranjit, so which challenges what was already there, or what was like what we call as like misrepresentation or appropriation. So that's something which cinema as a medium is also doing. And and how do we counter in academia is also like through how to look at how these filmmakers, like actually through their films, through the consciousness they bring in, or the criticality they bring in to look at earlier films, or and they don't stop with just critique, which is something which we sometimes do in academia. We just critique and stop it there. But I think these films sometimes offer something more than that. They just don't stop with just the critique, but it offers something like, for instance, certain emancipatory possibilities, emancipatory imaginaries, or emancipatory ways of challenging the system. So if we look at Ranjit's films, you can actually see there is a possibility. There is always like, even while you are at the doors of or impossibilities, or at the door of death, or at the end of your like whatever, on the face of death, there is a hope which all his films offer. Like take for instance Kala, where the protagonist kind of like can think that dies, but there is a community which emerges, like which is against the dominant power. So in a sense these films also offer something beyond just critiquing, but yeah, offering something uh more than that, or a certain emancipatory possibilities. I think, yeah, one of the things which we can also think of in academia is to, yeah, while looking at, like, we can actually critique these films, but what do we offer through our own work on looking at the important works done by, for instance, like Ranjit and others. So, and they are not only working just with cinema, what is within the narrative, but also like Ranjit is like he works also outside. Like he has a publication house called Neelam. He has a production house called Neelam, which funds films by, again, a lot of operas cast, like community directors. And he supports a lot of ventures like that, which are, again, which are important. So it is not just about the question of representation, but something which we have to actually go beyond that and look for other possibilities. But thank you so much for opening up that question. Thank you.
Priya, do you want to go next?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Manju. Sorry about that. I had some technical issues, so I couldn't ask earlier. A very interesting presentation, a very different topic to discuss and learn about. My question is, how does audience reception differ when caste issues are addressed in commercial versus independent cinema? independent cinema. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Priya, for that question. Yeah, audience reception is something which is very important when it comes to also cinema studies. There are very interesting also works on how to look at like different audience responses, and when it like your question is very pointed towards like how it is different when it comes to independent cinema and caste in popular cinema, if I'm not wrong.
Commercial cinema.
Commercial cinema. So one of the things to look at, so the independent cinemas are usually made for certain like group of people, like it is meant to be screened at very close gathering, like you would have independent film screening in certain film circles or film festivals, or like it is like university spaces or college spaces. It is made for certain group of people, and there is an audience who are already aware, or who are more like can say like kind of a political I'm politically aware. It's made for that group of people, whereas commercial cinema or the popular cinema is made for the larger public. And the question of caste coming there and here, it is different, because again, independent cinema, like we have had a lot of documentaries on especially when it comes to caste discrimination, and how it affects the most oppressed of the system. So there is this the spectatorship of that one is more conscious, more or who anticipates what you're going to see, but the other one is, it's largely about you are talking to a crowd who like sometimes, like yeah, there are people who are familiar with it, but in a sense there is a big difference when you are like or the audience of the popular cinema sees these things on screen. So the idea of spectatorship is, it's like it's important in this context, because who are you making the films for? So sometimes like you are also breaking the response, like you are also breaking what was earlier seen, or how people have taken it, and how there is a change which is happening right now with these images. So, and there are also like studies at how, like for instance, like Bell Hooks has looked at how the Black women spectators have seen this white films and felt like they were not there, or if they were there, they were always stereotyped. So she looks at it through the idea of oppositional gaze, where you reject, like you just like you watch it through particular like an oppositional gaze. When it comes to like Indian cinema also, there are studies on how spectatorship has changed. Like there is, yeah, somebody has also like written here Bahujan Gaze by Jyoti Nisha. And so there is a change which happens with, I mean, these are particular things to certain communities, but there is a larger change with spectatorship which is happening with across the community. So that is something which these figures have changed, or these figures brought a major change when it comes to uh, cinema. Like when it comes to cinema, like you're not used to seeing, for instance, in a Hindi film, you're not used to seeing a figure like an Ambedkar's picture and a figure like Manju Mai, which is a major change, which is happening, which is also like, I'm sure like that film is also a popular film, which is seen by everyone. So there are different changes when it comes to like the popular cinema and how the audience react to it. And so the whole idea of spectatorship here is different, and it kind of changes according to changes which are also happening in the industry. It's not that audience are always or react to certain films, because like for instance in Tamil, while there are so many anti-caste films, there are also like a lot of caste aesthetics kind of film, like films which celebrate certain caste pride and things like that. The very interesting thing is that many of them were failures. So there is a way that audience are now like a film like Tevor Magan, which used to be which was a major film in the like earlier times, which was about a community like Tevor communities pride, and it's mostly about the caste. So that film was a major hit. But a film like that now, like it is there are films like that happening now, but it is not necessarily watched by many, or people actually don't follow that kind of a practice. So in a sense, there is a change which happens also with audience, the way it changes in terms of like there are one side like anti-caste films, and how people are reacting to these films, and how there are also like caste aesthetics and how people are reacting to it. So there's a change which the spectators, who are not necessarily just the like people from certain oppressed caste communities, it's watched by everyone. It's also like COVID opened up the possibilities of like people are also watching these films across the world, like OTT platforms and things like that. So there is this, so you are not just making, or you are actually opening up the possibility of cinema to the spectators, and they are also changing. So that in that sense, yeah, the response is something, it is constantly changing. It's not just the earlier time which would have expected certain kind of caste aesthetics, but it is changing, and it is changing from perhaps like, yeah, different and even from different kinds of people or different groups of people. So yeah, I would say that it opens up a possibility of looking at, and yeah, it's not just about oppositional gaze, which is important, which was oppositional gaze can be a starting point, but now it has moved on to a look. I mean, I would say a look that touches, a look that invites, a look that makes us like more conscious or critical. So in a sense, yeah, it opens up new ways of thinking about cinema and the relationship between spectatorship. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Manju.
All right.
Amrapali, there are two questions, one from
Yeah.
Govind, another is from the Vishal Jadhav. So I will read the Govind questions. He cannot ask because he has sore throat. So how does Nagaraj navigate the incorporation of Ambedkarite aesthetics while also serving as a vehicle for narratives shaped by the dominant privileged communities and mainstream production houses? Is this a genuine critical presence, or does it risk commodifying Dalit aesthetics for broader commercial interest? Thanks, Govind, for question.
Thank you for that, Govind. So yeah, whether Nagaraj's way of making cinema, whether it is commodifying or it is aesthetics, it is very interesting, because it is perhaps like, if we look at how, like as I was telling, there is always this cinemas anyway made for entertainment. There is like you have to think of certain kind of a market, and all these are true. But when it comes to the aesthetics which Nagaraj uses, it has to be seen differently, because for instance, I always talk about, like when we look at the film Sairat, the way Nagaraj Manjule portrayed violence in that is, for instance, the climax, like it is very interesting. It is not, I mean, we are so used to watching so much violence on screen, especially when it comes to Dalits and other oppressed caste communities. And it is always the violence when you think of the caste oppressed. It's not their life, it's not their love, or it's not their everyday joys, but there's a way like it has always been violence. But in this particular film, even while he shows violence, it is not necessarily through the like the hitting, beating, or like even the killing is something you are you're just shown through like the only one image, but it is just shown through silence. So that's one way of changing the or looking at the possibilities of certain anti-caste aesthetics, where you can change the way you imagine or you perceive what is violent. So that is where I would see like aesthetics is important, where you are looking at, of course there is, I mean, I like always there is this idea of commercialization, but it is not just that. It is like where when you make a film or it's a climax, it's a tragic climax, but then how do you show that? You are not showing the whole violence on screen, but you're showing it through different ways. Like you're just showing through that the kid walks around and the kid cries, but you don't hear. It's just complete silence. And it's important because the Sairat is a film filled with sound, filled with music, filled with many dialogues and different kinds of, like, it entertains, or it also disturbs, or it makes us think, or especially our hearing, or you hear the film a lot, but suddenly there is silence, and it kind of brings us, or a certain way of thinking about what is death, and it silences all your senses. And so that's something which I would see it as a possibility of aesthetics which he brought into cinema. So which is, yeah, like these kind of things are more important. uh, and like that's something which I am more interested in than looking at the like other like perhaps, like, yeah, there are different ways of like commercialization, but yeah, this is something which, like, this is where the aesthetics is important, or I think which challenges the earlier representations or earlier practices of showing violence on screen. So yeah, I think, yeah, thank you so much for that.
Amrapali, we can take last question. It is from Vishal if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Manju, we are at time, but if you can take like quick couple minutes to answer the final question, and then we'll wrap
Sure.
up.
So Manju, you can read that question, or do you want me to read it?
Let me see.
From Vishal Jadhav.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
can
I
read
can see
for the
that
sake
now.
of the audience.
Yeah, it says, how can Baba Sahib Ambedkar's ideas be used as a pedagogical tool in contemporary Indian cinema to help the upper middle class from marginalized communities understand systemic barriers to merit and mobility, despite not facing direct discrimination or atrocity, while also addressing misconceptions about reservations? So yeah, this is something which is largely, it's not necessarily about how cinema, but it's about how Ambedkar's ideas can be used as a pedagogical tool. And yeah, especially when it comes to upper middle class from marginalized communities, which is which I think is not necessarily like something which we are looking at here. But I can I can actually think in other directions, which is about it is mostly about, again, when it comes to what is what is Ambedkarite ideals or Ambedkarite ideas, when it comes to look at the class questions, and within the caste, which is more about which is more about uh, looking at the marginalization and how people are not facing direct discrimination or atrocity, or how it is about, what is it, like, yeah, misconceptions about reservations, which I think is largely to do with like certain kind of uh, like how Ambedkar as a pedagogue, or how Ambedkar as somebody who has thought about these problems or these questions and brought into the public sphere, and that could be taken as like as something which we can look forward to. But in this case, how it can be used to kind of teach or help the upper middle class from the marginalized communities. It's more about, I would see, it's more about the idea of what is community, and what can community like practices do, where we're bringing these things in conversation and bringing these ideas and have discussions which are which need to be which are more critical and constructive, and bring these together. And yeah, it's more of a community work, and I don't think it is necessary to, like, I don't think it's just the what do you call, and at the individual level, but yeah, it's something where we can think of making a community which is more conscious, or which is more critical, or about the ideas which Baba Sahib Ambedkar brought. So it could be more about bringing engagement or dialogue. More of a critical dialogue or critical engagement with these ideas, and they bring different voices together. So I think I would stop with that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Manju. And that's last of our questions. And we are at time. We can wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining and listening in. And have a good weekend.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, VSG and Amrapali, also Priya. I saw Hemant and Bhagat, everyone, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for all the audience who stayed for this long and engaged with the questions. And it was great to share my thoughts and engage with the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Manju.
you, Manju.
Thank you.